everyone, it's Miss Katrina for another Storytime Sunday. Our book that we are going to read is called Monsters. Alright, so make sure that at the end of the video that you put a quick comment so that this will allow the Sun program to acknowledge which students have been watching, for us to keep attendance for our virtual programming. Also, we'll try to do a shout out to you in the next video, and you'll be put into a weekly drawing for a special prize. Alright, so let's get into monsters. So we are going to start with chapter 1. Chapter 1. Here be monsters. It's midnight in the forest. Suddenly a streak of lightning slashes through the sky. Thunder crashes overhead. Glowing eyes stare into the darkness. Then heavy footsteps shake the ground. What is coming? Could it be a monster? Long ago, people believed in monsters. They thought there were monsters on land, in the sea, and in the sky. What else could cause so many scary things? Today we know what caused volcanoes and earthquakes, but back then nobody knew. People thought earthquakes must be caused by fighting giants. They thought volcanoes came from dragons breathing fire. Early sailors didn't understand storms. Sometimes a big wave flipped over a boat. Sailors thought an angry sea monster had done it. Here's this picture of, it's got a volcano erupting and some people running away. The sky might turn as dark as night in the middle of the day. It was an eclipse. The moon had passed between the sun and the earth, but people didn't know that. They thought a huge bird had blotted out the sun. No one actually saw a monster, but people felt they had proof. They pointed to the giant bones of birds that had weighed half a ton. They had no idea the birds were much too heavy to fly. And they didn't know the birds had died out long ago. Once in a while, an enormous tentacle washed up on the beach. It was part of a giant squid. Giant squids can weigh 2,000 pounds. Most of the time, they stay deep underwater, but anyone who saw parts of them easily believed they were monsters. And what about huge skulls? One with one hole in the middle of the forehead. They must have come from giant one-eyed monsters. Here's a picture of this skull. Today we know that these are really the skulls of ancient elephants. The hole is where the elephant's trunk was attached, but for a long time, nobody understood these things. People were sure they had just one meaning. Scary monsters were everywhere. Right, in Chapter 2, Monsters on Land. I'll eat you all! A Cyclops was standing around his dark cave. He was 50 feet tall. In the middle of his forehead was one eye. The Cyclops grabbed a man and swallowed him headfirst. Then another man, then another. Finally, the Cyclops laid down across the opening in his cave. Here's a picture of the Cyclops. I'll eat the rest of you in the morning, he said, and he closed his enormous eye and fell asleep. Odysseus was the leader of a group of Greek soldiers. They had wandered into the Cyclops' cave by mistake. Odysseus made a plan to save his men. He took a burned stick from the fire, quickly stabbed it into the monster's eye to blind him. But how could the men get out with the Cyclops guarding the exit? The monster had a flock of sheep in his cave. Odysseus told the men to tie themselves to the sheep's bellies. In the morning, the Cyclops let the sheep out to graze. He petted each one as it passed by him. He wanted to make sure only sheep left the cave, not Odysseus' men. And he didn't feel the men under the sheep. They escaped from the cave and ran away. A Cyclops was a type of giant that lived in Greece. Many were blacksmiths. The one Odysseus met herded sheep. Greece seemed to be full of monsters. Medusa was the ugliest one. She was so ugly that anyone who saw her turned to stone. She had a huge black tongue and sharp fangs. And the worst part was what grew on her head. She had live snakes instead of hair. Someone needed to get rid of Medusa. A Greek hero named Perseus decided he would do it. The gods helped him with two amazing gifts. Here's this picture of Medusa and some men. These men here have turned to stone because they looked at her. One was a magic helmet. The other was a pair of winged sandals. Perseus put on the helmet. It made him invisible. Then he put on the winged sandals. Now he could fly. He flew to Medusa's cave. There he found the monster asleep. The cave was crowded with statues of men. All of them had looked at Medusa and been turned to stone. Perseus was very careful not to look at her. He looked only at her reflection in his shiny shield. He sneaked up on her. Then with one tragic blow, he cut off her head. Later, Perseus put Medusa's head on his shield. It turned his enemies to stone. Another monster also had the look of death. If you set eyes on a basilisk, it's kind of hard to read and say, you would fall down dead. There was only one way to save yourself. You had to hold a mirror in front of it. If the basilisk saw itself, it died of fright. What did the monster look like? Nobody who saw one lived long enough to say. Here's a picture of it. But artists drew pictures of how they thought the basilisk looked. These pictures showed a monster with a rooster's head and legs and a snake's fangs and tail. It had wings covered with scales or feathers. A basilisk could shatter rocks just by breathing on them. In one story, a man on horseback stabbed a basilisk with a long spear. He didn't look at it or touch it, but the monster's poisonous breath rose up through the spear. It killed the man and his horse too. Oh, that's scary. Many monsters use poison, including manticores. They lived in the jungles of Asia. Manticore means eater of people. What do you think was a manticore's favorite food? Manticore had a body with a bright red line and a scorpion's tail, but its face was human. It had blue eyes and a huge mouth with 3 rows of sharp teeth. When it saw a person, it fired poisonous spikes from the tip of its tail. Here's a picture of it. The person fell over and the manticore gobbled up every bit of him, even his teeth, clothes, and shoes. There were many manticores, but only one Minotaur. The monster had a body of a man and the head and tail of a bull. It lived in a large maze under the island of Crete. Every year, Minos, the god of Crete, lowered 7 boys and 7 girls into the maze. The Minotaur hunted and ate them. After many years, a Greek hero named Theseus came to kill the Minotaur. King Minos' daughter, Ariadne, fell in love with Theseus. She gave him a ball of thread and a sword. Theseus tied up one end of the thread at the maze's opening. He unwound the thread as he moved through the maze. Finally, he came upon the Minotaur. After a fierce battle, Theseus killed it with the sword. Then he followed the thread out of the maze. He sailed back to Greece with Ariadne. Everyone knew where the Minotaur lived, but no one knew where the monsters were hiding. When people saw strange shapes far away or heard a hiss in the grass, they shivered with fear. Was it a monster? Was it coming for them? All right, that was chapter 1 and 2 of Monsters. So, remember, comment so we know that you saw that, and your name can be put into a raffle, and you could get a prize. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.